Breaking right now on Morning News Now, all systems go. This morning, history unfolding at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. NASA's historic Artemis 2 moon mission, now less than 12 hours away. Liftoff is set for 6:24 tonight. Right now, 4 astronauts preparing for liftoff, including the first woman and the first black astronauts to go on a lunar mission. Their epic 10-day journey taking them around the Earth and the moon for the first crewed lunar orbit in more than 5 decades.
It's about human history. It's the story of humanity, not black history, not women's history, but that it becomes human history.
Tonight's launch coming after years of preparation and months of delays. The goal, to test technology meant to establish a long-term presence on the moon and beyond.
We finally arrived. I mean, the next chapter in America's journey to the moon is about to begin. You got America's moon rocket out on the launch pad. You got 4 astronauts that are about to make history. We're about to make our return to the moon, and this time to stay.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us. We are orbiting the moon this morning here.
Look at how cool that is.
Our team going all out with the graphics on this big day. I'm Joe Fryer.
Yeah, and look at me. I'm in my space shirt. I'm Savannah Sellers.
Let's get right to it. Meteorologist Angie Lassman will have a look at the weather ahead of the launch window. But let's start with NBC News senior correspondent Tom Costello at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Tom, good morning.
Hey guys, good morning. So this may be the biggest mission for NASA since Apollo 17 in 1972, sending astronauts back around the moon. The first time that we've had astronauts on a lunar trajectory, if you will, since the early 70s. Tanking, fueling begins in the 7:30 half hour, 730,000 gallons of fuel. The 4 astronauts who are going to be on board, they've been in seclusion or quarantine. That's a necessary procedure to make sure that they don't pick up a germ or something before they start heading off on a 10-day mission with just the 4 of them. And as you know, they are Reed Weissman, the commander, Victor Glover, the pilot, also Christina Cook, the mission specialist, and finally Jeremy Hansen, a mission specialist, and the Canadian on board. This is the mission that NASA has been planning for, and it sets the stage now for actually landing astronauts on the moon as soon as 2028. And the big change here at NASA in the last few weeks is that NASA is now prioritizing that with 2 missions to land on the moon as soon as 2028. Next year, Artemis 3 will be in a Earth orbit in which they are going to be testing all of their docking procedures, everything that they will need to fully vet that spacecraft, the Orion spacecraft, before they in fact go to the moon and put astronauts on the moon. So far, weather here today, 80% chance of a go condition, no serious technical issues working. And so right now, very much everybody here at the Cape, everybody at Kennedy Space Center is ready for this very big day. Joe and Savannah, back to you.
All right, Tom, thank you.
All right, as we inch closer to liftoff, we will be keeping a very close eye, of course, on this Artemis 2 mission. So stay with us. We're going to bring you an update on all of the launch preparations with in-depth analysis from a panel of experts later in the hour. And be sure to watch the start of this 10-day journey around the moon during our special coverage right here on NBC News Now. It's going to start at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Well, let's bring in meteorologist Angie Lassman for a check of the conditions for today's lunar launch.
Angie, this is so important. What can NASA and the crew of Artemis 2 expect?
So important indeed. And we've got a couple of things that we're looking at right now, along with, of course, those NASA meteorologists. Here's the current lay of the land for Cape Canaveral and Kennedy Space Center, where 39B launch pad is. We've got southeast winds just 2 miles per hour. Temperatures hovering into those mid to upper 60s, and wind gusts coming in at about 5 miles per hour. Notice that we've got a couple of these little showers that we're tracking right now, and there is a potential to see some of those showers kind of centered across the state as we get into the middle part of our day. The good news is, once we get to the launch window of 6:24 p.m. to 8:24 p.m. tonight, it looks like most of that rain will have died down. We've got just a light sea breeze that we're looking at, anywhere from 5 to 10 miles per hour out of the east. Right now, NASA looking at mainly cloud conditions and some elevated wind speeds at the surface. Those are the 2 things they're kind of honing in on for tonight's launch. But as you heard Tom say, 80% favorable. This is actually pretty ideal for launch. Now, if it doesn't happen tonight and we look ahead to tomorrow, not quite as good when it comes to the weather. We've got thunderstorms possible for your day tomorrow, and really the cloudy conditions and the elevated winds will be there as well. So multiple other things that we'll have to watch for. If we look ahead to Friday, that next launch window, 8 to 10 p.m. on Friday, Friday, still the cloud cover, the isolated showers and storms. So hopefully, fingers crossed, everything is a go for tonight. We'll keep an eye on that. We're also watching an area of some kind of really impactful weather and busy weather across parts of the Midwest, stretching to the Northeast. Late afternoon, we've got some of these stronger storms developing, and this kind of ramps up the potential for some severe storms centered across the middle of the country. There is an enhanced risk for places like Oklahoma City, so damaging hail, wind gusts, and a couple of tornadoes will be likely. And we're not done with our severe potential as we get through the day today. Instead, tomorrow, we're kind of looking at that intensifying storm across the upper Midwest. The snow, the freezing rain, and the potential for thunderstorms will all be there. And guys, it's going to be Chicago, Detroit, Indianapolis that have to watch for the potential for some of those stronger storms with hail, wind gusts, and tornadoes on the table. Back over to you.
All right. Thanks, Angie.
Well, as if a voyage to the moon wasn't a big enough story for one day, this morning the Supreme Court is also going to hear arguments in the high-stakes case over President Trump's executive order challenging what has long been believed to be the constitutional right to birthright citizenship. Now, Trump issued the order last year on the first day of his second term. It declares that children born to parents who are in the U.S. illegally or temporarily are not American citizens.
The justices will hear the Trump administration's appeal of a lower court ruling which struck down those restrictions. The American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, is leading the challenge to Mr. Trump's order, calling it unconstitutional and just out of step with American values. In an unprecedented move, President Trump says he plans to personally attend today's hearing. He also weighed in on the case.
Everything having to do with birthright citizenship, it was at the end of the Civil War. The reason was it had to do with the babies of slaves and the protection of the babies of slaves. It didn't have to do with the protection of multi-millionaires and billionaires wanting to have their children get an American citizenship.
For more on this, let's bring in NBC News legal affairs reporter Gary Grumbach. Gary, good morning. So tell us who the plaintiffs are in this case and what the key legal arguments the justices will be hearing from both sides are.
So, Savannah, this was a class action lawsuit originally brought by a woman who lives in New Hampshire. She's a Honduran woman, and it was brought by her on behalf of thousands of women that are similarly situated to her. And their argument was that the court needs to look at the tradition and the history of the 14th Amendment and its corresponding congressional statute, specifically 5 words: subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Their argument was, if you're subject to U.S. law and you live here in the United States, you are subject to the jurisdiction thereof, the United States, and therefore you should have birthright citizenship. The Trump administration is arguing that if you are they're urging the justices to look at the history too, but in a little bit of a different way. They're saying the citizenship clause, which was debated back in 1866 and then passed into law in 1868, apply to the children of freed slaves only, and not the thousands and thousands of people that we're seeing it applied to today.
So, Gary, we heard President Trump there a moment ago saying this is going to impact wealthy foreigners who are essentially trying to buy citizenship for their children. What does the ACLU have to say about who this executive order will impact most and what we'll see happen if this is upheld?
So the ACLU, who was arguing this case, says it's going to be impacting thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands potentially of people. Of course, they're very confident they're going to succeed in their arguments today. But they said if they don't, the results could be cataclysmic. Here's what they said.
Tens of thousands of babies being born every month who are targeted by this executive order. For them, it means losing their constitutional right to birthright citizenship, as well as being exposed to arrest, detention, and deportation from the only country they've ever known. Questioning whether other Americans are real Americans would be supercharged.
Now, we do expect a decision here by the Supreme Court's end of the term, which is end of June, early July, guys.
Back in the fall, Gary, President Trump had said he would go to the Supreme Court hearing about the legality of his tariffs. In the end, he did not. How unusual would it be for him to actually attend today's hearing?
So there is no record of a sitting U.S. president ever attending Supreme Court arguments, and that's not by accident here. It's not like anybody didn't have this idea before. There's a long history and tradition of the separation of powers between the three branches of government. And this is a man who has said some, frankly, pretty nasty things about the justices that he will currently be watching at 10 a.m. as they take on this argument on an executive order that he wants to be put across the line here. And so certainly this is going to be something of a little bit of an intimidation elevation factor of him sitting in one of the first rows of the Supreme Court, looking at 3 of the justices that he has appointed, 2 of which he's not too happy right now because of the tariff decision. Guys.
All right, Gary, thank you so much.
Let's move now to the latest out of the Middle East. President Trump told the British newspaper The Telegraph in a new interview that he is strongly considering pulling out of NATO. He remains angry he was unable to convince NATO allies to use military force to help open that critical Strait of Hormuz. And as a result, global gas prices are skyrocketing. And yesterday, Mr. Trump said the U.S. will be wrapping up the war with Iran, quote, very soon. Here's more of what he told reporters in the Oval Office yesterday.
I would say that within 2 weeks, maybe 3. I think with 2 or 3 weeks. We'll leave because there's no reason for us to do this. We're finishing the job, and I think within maybe 2 weeks, maybe a couple of days longer to do the job. But we want to knock out every single thing there.
Financial markets rallied at the prospect of an end to the war. President Trump said no when he was asked if Iran has to make a deal for the U.S. to end this military operation. He told reporters the U.S. will leave the war once Iran is no longer able to develop a nuclear weapon.
Tonight, President Trump is scheduled to deliver what the White House is calling an important update on Iran in an address to the nation at 9 p.m. Eastern. And this all comes as Iran's president says he is willing to end the war if the U.S. and Israel meet certain conditions. That's according to Iran's state media.
NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley joins us now from Tel Aviv, Israel, with the latest. Matt, good morning. So what guarantees does Iran need to reach any sort of deal with the U.S. to end the war? And where does Israel then fit into all this?
Yeah, I mean, the Iranians have been very clear from the beginning. When President Trump gave Iran that 15-point plan that he said could resolve the war, this was through Pakistani intermediaries, the Israelis fired back with 5 points of their own. Specifically, they want to see the end of attacks on Iran. They want full control or sovereignty, they said, over the Strait of Hormuz, which they have been blocking for the past several weeks. So these are things that we heard again yesterday, but it wasn't quite as specific. The Iranian basically agenda here has not changed. They're essentially in a position where they win by simply surviving. And that's why we've been seeing the Trump administration on their side moderating their message. Now, the Trump administration seems to be defining or redefining the notion of regime change as change within the regime. So they say they've already met that goal. And we also heard from President Trump saying that so many of the goals that they may or may not have set out at the outset of this war have now been resolved. Now, as far as the Israelis are concerned, they've said that they only have, according to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, about half of their targets that have been met. We have continued to hear air raid sirens here in central Israel over the past 48 hours, now well more than a month into this war. So the Israelis, while certainly a very vital role in attacking Iran alongside the U.S., they are not done yet. And it's unlikely that they're going to be very excited about the notion of a quick resolution to this conflict with so many of their war gains left unmet.
Matt, yesterday an Iranian drone struck a Kuwaiti oil tanker that was near Dubai. And this morning, Qatar Energy says there was a missile attack on one of their fuel oil tankers. Tell us about these latest strikes near the Strait of Hormuz.
This feeds into exactly what I was just saying, which is basically that the Iranians have kept up their fire now more than a month into this fight. Despite what we're hearing from the Trump administration about how most of America's goals have been met, about how Iran's ballistic missile campaign, how its ballistic missile industry has now been almost completely destroyed, we've heard now those goals somewhat moderated as well. Marco Rubio saying that their goal is to not entirely obliterate Iran's ballistic missile capability, but to take it back several years, it sounds like, to almost entirely destroy it. So that goal from the White House has now been kind of dialed back as this war stretches into its second month, apparently to the surprise of the Trump administration.
Matt, we've been talking about journalists in the region this week, and we're learning now an American journalist named Shelley Kittleson was kidnapped in Baghdad, Iraq. That's according to the outlet Al Monitor, where she's a contributor. What all do we know?
Yeah, this is, according to the FBI and according to the United States, likely the work of Kataib Hezbollah. That is an Iran-backed militia in Iraq. It is thought to be the same group who kidnapped a Russian-Israeli researcher for 2 years, only a couple of years ago, her name, Elizabeth Surkov. So there is actually some pretty shocking video of this young journalist, Shelley Kittleson, being kidnapped, snatched off the streets of Baghdad. Our understanding from officials is that there was a car chase and that the car she was in flipped over. One of the other cars that the kidnappers were in came and recovered her from the street and dragged her off to, well, we don't know where. So the FBI had said, according to the White House, Dylan Johnson tweeting that the State Department previously fulfilled our duty to warn this individual of threats against them, and we will continue to coordinate with the FBI to ensure their release as quickly as possible. So in other words, it sounds as though American law enforcement had an idea that this journalist faced danger and that they did warn her, maybe not in time.
All right, Matt Bradley in Tel Aviv. Matt, thank you so much.
We have NBC News senior national politics reporter Jonathan Allen joining us now from Washington with more. John, good morning. I want to go back to this headline from The Telegraph with this interview from the president. Why does President Trump say he's strongly considering pulling out of NATO?
Yeah, good morning, Savannah. Good morning, Joe. The president says that he's strongly considering pulling out of NATO because he doesn't feel like NATO is reciprocating toward the United States. There is a mutual self-defense pact among these nations. He believes that the refusal of some of these countries to aid the United States, including, as he said in a Truth Social post yesterday, France, which he's upset with for not refueling planes. I'm sorry, not allowing planes to fly over his airspace, in the UK for not engaging more directly in the war with Iran. Basically, his argument is that the United States has been there for these countries and that they have not been there in return for the United States. Of course, many of these countries were there for the United States after 9/11, after the United States was attacked as part of that mutual self-defense pact.
John, back home yesterday, gas prices here in the U.S. passed $4 a gallon for the first time since 2022. Now, President Trump is telling allies, in his own words, get your own oil from the Strait of Hormuz. How much is this war with Iran just further changing America's relationship with its allies?
I think it's at least temporarily significantly changing America's relationship with its allies. You see things like France saying that the United States can't fly over its airspace. You see the United Kingdom not joining with the United States where it has in recent wars, whether it is post 9/11 or, with regard to various other military activities of the United States across the globe. So I think there is a change going on there where Europe basically said, no, and by the way, Joe, not just Europe. Let's remember that the White House was asking Congress for $200 billion to keep this war going. Congress left town without giving $200 billion to the administration to do that. So the president is running into guardrails, not only internationally, but domestically.
John, we mentioned this earlier. President Trump scheduled to deliver an address to the nation. It's tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern. They're saying that this will be an important update on Iran. Any idea what to expect?
What's on your bingo card, guys? You never know exactly what to expect with one of the president's addresses. But I think he's been previewing it. I mean, unless he does a 180, he's basically been saying that we are going to leave Iran. The United States is going to leave Iran within the next 2 weeks or so. That the goals do not include reopening the Strait of Hormuz. In fact, he said in the Truth Social post yesterday that the UK, if they want Hormuz reopened, will go seize the strait itself. So I think we're likely to hear him talk about winding down the war and try to present the war in the most favorable terms possible to the mission that he had laid out.
All right. Thank you very much, John Allen.
All right. We mentioned gas, and we have been following the steady climb of gas prices since the war with Iran began just over a month ago.
For the first time since 2022, the average price of a gallon of gas here in the U.S., it has crossed over that $4 mark.
Joining us now is Patrick DeHaan. He's the head of petroleum analysis at Gas Buddy. Patrick, good to have you with us. How big of a deal is this $4 a gallon milestone? Just what does it mean for our wallets?
Yeah, good morning, Savannah and Joe. It's something we have not seen for more than 200 days, going back to 2009. So we're getting to an uncomfortable level for many Americans who look at that $4 sign and again, we haven't seen that for a whole lot of days going back almost 2 decades. So it's certainly a rarity. And you're seeing it in some of the nation's most populous states. Florida recently joining that club with prices now in Florida averaging above $4.20 a gallon. California pressing very close to $6. Diesel prices also in most states above the $5 a gallon mark. So Americans generally start to reduce their discretionary spending as their gas bill goes up. In fact, today alone, new calculations I just did, Americans are going to be spending roughly $411 million more on gasoline just today than they did about a month ago. That is huge, and that's being siphoned out of the rest of the U.S. economy.
Just how high do you think these prices could go?
Well, I think to the point later tonight, I'm going to be watching what President Trump says about Iran. It's all really contingent on the Strait of Hormuz. We could continue to go up the national average unless something is solidly done to address and reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Even if the U.S. leaves the Middle East, I don't think the strait is going to reopen overnight. Iran has developed muscle memory on how to control this area, and that's worrisome. So we could continue to head northward. $4.50 a gallon isn't out of reach, and $5 is not an impossibility. All the details tonight I'm going to be looking would be focused on the Strait of Hormuz and what the status will be. Will the U.S. leave it alone? If it's unaddressed, that is problematic for the price of gasoline and diesel.
And when we talk about the Strait, it looks like Iran's imposing this toll system on vessels wanting to get through the Strait of Hormuz, though countries aligned with the U.S. and Israel likely still be banned from passing through. If this is the new normal, just what could it mean for oil prices?
Yeah, Joe, any restriction on the strait, whether tolls, whether lack of confidence on sailing through, is problematic for oil. Oil is used to the free flow of oil through the Strait of Hormuz. So even tolls, any restrictions through the strait are going to be problematic and really restrict all of that oil from flowing to the market. So that could be problematic. If the U.S. leaves the strait unaddressed, I would likely look to other partners in Europe, and certainly China and India would have a very significant impact here on wanting to resume this. But it's all going to be in the details of what the president says tonight. If the strait remains restricted, it's going to be problematic still for many Americans and really the global economy, as gas, diesel, and jet fuel prices could continue to go up.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.